Hey, welcome to Board Gems. I'm Daryl. I like to talk about older board games, and I'm going to talk about two board games this time. Normally, I do a teach, here's how you play it, and then I talk about whether I still think it's a gem or not. It's a little tricky because there's two games that are one is an implementation of the other, and they're very similar, same designer, same concept, but they're different enough that I don't feel super comfortable teaching one and not the other. Like, which one do I teach? And I can't teach both, the video would be long. So I'm going to do a video that doesn't have a rules explanation. Maybe I'll do separate ones for these. I haven't decided yet. Feel free to let me know if it's something you're looking for. But it's an older board game, came out in 1998 and had a reprint, a remake in 2018, 20th anniversary more or less. They didn't promote it as a 20th anniversary. And it's a game that I really want to talk about. So this is the original version, Medieval Merchant, 1998, originally from Goldsieber in their kind of standard Goldsieber kind of large box format, designed by Christvart Conrad. I know him as also the designer of Nuggets, which is a very cool little game that I'll cover at some point. I've also seen his name in bylines in Spielbox. Now, back then, they didn't really scale games based on number of players. So it's basically the same game for 3 to 6 players with special rules for 2, and the special rules aren't even all that different. Generally, you want the upper range. So I like 5, but I'll play 4 to 6. I won't really consider playing it with 3 personally. The box says 60 to 90 minutes. I think that's fair. And it also says ages 12 and up. Bit of an exaggeration in terms of involvement or complexity. I think 10-year-ups would be completely fine with it, 10-year-olds. Here's the thing. This is quite possibly the beigest game ever made. This is sort of what people would look at when they were thinking of sort of a stereotypical old German style game. You know, it's got some medieval merchant on the cover, right? And this one's literally called Medieval Merchant in English. I think the name in German was a little bit more of a pun, a little bit more lighthearted, but in this, it's just, this is what you get. And the board is several different shades of beige with all these routes, and the routes connect cities, and each route has a different kind of cost connecting the cities. The idea of the game is that you start off with a single, let's call it a franchise, because that is in fact what the new version is about, is franchises. You start off with your sort of home branch in a little town, and every turn you get income from the cities you happen to be located in, and also can choose to expand into one new town or city. You can only expand once on your turn. It's very important to get into the cities, especially the big cities, because your income in a particular city is dependent on how many empty spaces there are left. That is, how much unused capacity is in that city. So if you have a city that has 3 spaces in it, and you have one branch, and there's 2 spaces empty, you're getting 2 incomes, basically. I mean, it's multiplied. There's a multiplier there. So in a small city with not many empty spaces, you're getting a little bit of income, but not very much. But picture a city of size 8, and you're the only person in there. You just have one branch, and it's just taking up 1 space, so there's 7 spaces left. You're getting 7 incomes for that city per turn. So, of course, the big thing, as in a lot of games, is choosing whether to prioritize income or victory points. Because income is really, really important, obviously. The costs connecting 2 large cities is usually quite high. It's cheaper if you go through the smaller towns and smaller cities, but that takes longer, right? And you're only building 1 branch per turn. But cities are also worth points if you're able to fill it, and you don't even have to fill it fully. If you can occupy with your branches more than half of all the spaces. So in a city of size 6, you'd occupy 4 spaces. If you're in a city of size 5, you occupy 3. If you're able to do that, you're going to get full points for that city, which is its value, its face value. So a city of size 6 is worth 6 points. It's quite good. If it fills up and nobody has been able to get that sort of clear majority in those spaces, then whoever has the most branches, houses in that city will score half the value rounded down. Ties broken in favor of whoever got there first. So like big cities are worth a lot of points, but they also generate income so long as you're there and there isn't much competition there. So picture a big city, they're desperate for your business, for anybody's business, and you're the only one in there, you're making bank. But as soon as somebody else comes in, or more than one person comes in, first of all, that's going to decrease the income for everybody. Anybody who has at least one house branch in that city is going to score the income for it on their turn. But that income is, that's a smaller number now that people are getting. And so then as soon as when other players come in, now you're looking at, well, do I want to still try to get income for it? Maybe I'm still getting a good bit of income for it. Or am I trying to fight in order to get the majority so I can get points for it? Because, of course, points in the end is what matters. Money converts to points, but at a terrible ratio by the end of the game. So you want points, but you need income to get points, right? It's that classic decision that you have to make. And you have to make that decision for every city you're in. For every city on the board that you have a branch in, you have to decide, do I want the income for it, or do I want to build another branch in that city, expand my presence, try to go for the majority? That means I'm not getting income for that city, but I'm competing, right, to try to get that majority. And that is the big decision. Your turn comes around, and it's a decision that becomes, longer and harder the later in the game it goes, because you're in presence in more cities. But as cities score, and somebody gets the points for them, then they come off the board, so you're not getting income for those anymore anyway. It's vitally important in this game to see when other players have a good position, maybe they have a big city all to themselves, and to not let that happen, because there isn't any real endgame scoring. Like certainly no surprise scoring, certainly no come from behind scoring, which is almost the same thing, right? Like, if somebody gets a lead, well, they're probably going to win. There's no surprises later, usually. So in this game, it's very important to see which players are in an advantageous position and compete with them on it. If one player has a big city that's in one corner of the board, and you're the closest other player to that opponent, get in there, work your way over there. You have to prioritize. This city is a little bit cheaper to get in, it's going to build my income, but if I'm focusing in that direction, this guy is going to have that city all to himself. I need to work my way over there instead. There's a bit of planning ahead, at least one turn, because you have to manage, it's a cash flow situation, because in this game, you choose how much income you get, right? For each city that's on the board, you're deciding, do I want to try to compete for the points, or do I want to get income for it? And if you do the former too much, then you're not going to have much income to work with for the next turn, because you get income late in the turn. Based on the decisions you make on every city that you're in, that'll determine your income that you get, and that's how much money you're going to have to work with on the next turn. Of course, you carry money forward, but you can very easily fall into a little bit of a trap, right? You have to plan for that. You have to plan to make sure you have steady income, so you're not, caught with your pants down, needing to go somewhere and not, you can fall behind in this game, and it can be punishing. Interestingly, the board is static, right? Like the cities are always in the same places, the same size cities in the same places. The variability comes in that you can choose the order the cities come out. On your first several turns, you'll have city discs, and on your turn, you're deciding one of them to put out on the board and make it open for everybody to expand it to. And so that variability comes in the first couple turns, and then once all the cities are on the board, it is completely no luck. The only luck in the game is which cities you're getting in the initial sort of hand of discs. But you're choosing the order they come out, and after a few turns, all of them will be out. The whole board will be opened up for everybody. Very player dependent. very dependent on players keeping an eye on each other, making sure nobody has too much of an advantage, deciding where to focus on. This is a decision that I love to make in board games, right? There's like 3 different directions I could go. I need to prioritize. You're thinking, okay, player A builds in the city. Player B's managed to come in and get into that city. Well, player A's turn comes around again. They're going to put another one in there. They're going to choose to not get income, and they have a lead. You know, if it's a tie, is whoever got there first. So that start player, the player who's in there first, is probably going to get it, right? So what's the advantage of the other player from going in there? It's forcing them to do it, right? If they don't do it, then they can just sit back and not worry, not be in a rush to score the points for it, to score the city, and instead just get fat stacks of cash from that city. You need players to go in. They're going to get a little bit of income from it, but moreover, they're keeping the other player from getting too much income too easily. Will they be able to compete in that city? It's tough because they're losing a tiebreaker, anybody who comes in later. But there are also 2 tokens that each player gets, which allows them basically to double an action. They can expand into 2 different cities, 2 new places on their turn. Or they can get super big income, and that's literally all they do on their turn is just get income. But it's a lot of it, right? I'm stuck. I have no cash. I'm going to turn one of these in and just get a big wad of income, but I'm not going to do anything else. And the third thing, though, is being able to put down 2 houses, 2 branches when you are expanding your presence in an existing city. And so if another player does that in a city that you started, that you were the first in, then suddenly they're leading, right? And you're behind the 8 ball. So you'll have to use one of yours, maybe. You only have 2. That's a decision that I want to point out. I think that's interesting. I'll talk about it more when I talk about franchise, because they changed this a little bit. If you don't use those doublers, by the end of the game, nothing happens. You don't get any points for them. So you want to use them, but the decision is where to use them. I want to use it here because I'm competing for this city. Is this important? Because you're limited in what you can do on your turn, you can try to get away from it. You know, I'm going to expand into this city, you know, not use my doubler, you know, or maybe, you know, we're tied there. I was there first. I'm not going to expand in there. I'm going to get income. What do? You're also there. You could expand your presence. It's less income for both of us, but you are now leading in terms of, you know, if we score that city, if we complete it, then you're getting the points and not me. But you're sacrificing your income doing that. Maybe it's worthwhile. If it's just you and me and it's a big city, there's room for both of us, eh? Let's both be in there. Let's both get the income from it. You know, that puts us at an advantage compared to the other players. Of course, at some point, one of us is going to say, okay, I have enough income. I'm trying to get that city because that's worth a lot of points. And cities that are not completed by the end of the game don't score anything. So a little bit of chicken there, right? You and I are there first. Maybe we both get income from it, but we don't want to probably leave it until the end of the game. We want to score it before the game ends. Who's going to be the first to try to give up that good income and start competing for the majority scoring there? The map can be a little bit dizzying. It has all these different routes crisscrossing all around the map, and they all have completely different values, making change the board game. Oh my goodness. The game comes with paper money. I suggest not even touching it. You have to use something like poker chips in this game. You absolutely have to. The amounts involved are very precise, you know, like 47 and, you know, 29, like that. And making change is a big pain in the butt. There's a number of reasons, that being one of them, why this game's actually going to be a hard sell today. For one thing, it's a lot of exchanging paper money. Like, it's worse than Monopoly that way, you know, making change. But also, of course, the look of it. You know, it's almost made fun of as sort of the premium example of that old German style game with the boring cover and the boring looks and the beige and everything, and just numbers, looks really mathy because there's numbers all over the board. But it is a really interesting game. A touch long, and you want a lot of players because you need competition. Minimum 4. 5 is great. 6, surprisingly, I say surprisingly because it's not common to have a really great game that plays up to 6 players, and Medieval Merchant does. It plays great with 6 players. So if you can find other players to get past the presentation, and you find a way to just improve the quality of life a little bit by, for example, using poker chips, and if everybody's okay with making change really fast, doing arithmetic really fast and making change, okay, right? Then this is absolutely something worth looking at. Every turn you have decisions to make, and once you learn the game, once you are comfortable with the game, the decisions can be really fast. But that first game is probably going to be a bit slow if you have 5 or 6 cities on the board that you have presence in, and you are deciding which ones you want to take income for versus try to compete on points. Generally, you want to do both, right? Generally, you want to have presence in multiple cities, and then some of them get income and some of them try to compete for the points, try to build majority scoring there. But which cities do you do which in? That's the important decision, and it's a really great decision, and you really feel involved in the game, and it's a very player-driven game. I definitely recommend Table Talk. Right? Like if one player is in the corner all by themselves and they're making good income, point it out. Hey Sally, you're the closest. You have to get in on that city because you can't let Ken there all by himself score so much income from that one city. You're the closest. Try to get in there too, and that helps Sally too, right? It's rather unforgiving, I suppose you could say, but it shines with many players who all are kind of on the same level. There's basically no luck in the game. It's player driven, and so it requires a level of awareness, a level of being able to read the board, which is not the easiest in this game, granted. Having that situational awareness in the game, seeing where the opportunities are, planning ahead, because it's like, okay, next turn I think I'm gonna make this big connection across the map, but that's going to be expensive, so this turn I better bank some income, even if that means I'm going to be falling behind a little bit on potential majority scoring in some of these cities, but I need the income. Very important decisions. Every turn you have these important decisions that you have to make. It's at the beginning, then decisions are very easy, and initial turns can be super fast. I have no complaint about anything about the game that would affect my enjoyment other than the quality of life of making tons of change with paper money, maybe the board being a little bit hard to read for some people. I didn't really have a problem myself, but I could see other people. There was talk back in the late 2000s or mid to late 2000s about a new version of this that Rio Grande was going to produce. It didn't happen. Number of years later, Queen steps in. So let's look at and talk about the new version of Medieval Merchant called Franchise. This version came out in 2018 from Queen Games, and it is a very heavily revised version of Medieval Merchant. Some of the more obvious problems with Medieval Merchant have been addressed. So for one thing, no more beige board. It's Ian O'Toole art, very colorful. Instead of roots across the board being potentially any sort of value and the actual value being printed on the board, instead there are several different sort of tiers of paths ranging from $0 to $8. So they simplified it so that you don't have to look at numbers on the board. Instead, it's a medium green line or a really fat pink line. We call them water slides when we play. We're water sliding over to New York. Paper money has been replaced with card money. Better. The sums of everything have been lessened. So instead of you counting the empty spaces in Medieval Merchant, I think you multiply by a certain number and that's how much money you get. It actually goes in the other direction. So you count those number of spaces there, or more easily, you just look at the biggest number that's visible, and that's how many spaces there are. So you just sum all those up, but that's not money. Instead, you look at kind of a chart that each player has to say, based on number of players. So it'd be like, okay, this amount of income, from all the cities equals this many dollars. So the numbers involved are much, much smaller. Unfortunately, the game only goes up to 5 players now, not 6. I would probably say Medieval Merchant might be best with 5 anyway, but it handles 6 great. And from like a gamer's point of view, because the game doesn't scale, the more players means the more elbowing each other, right? The less room each player has, so the more confrontation that happens on the board. And gamers often like that. I like it too, but that doesn't mean I think it's best that way. So probably for Medieval Merchant, I hover around the 5-player mark as my favorite. And this one only goes up to 5. But just a bit of a disappointment because 6 players, there aren't that many great games that play well with 6 players. So it is unfortunate that franchise loses that. The theming, the setting, makes a lot of sense. So the map is the United States, and we're talking about franchises. Although, weirdly, the way that Ian O'Toole or the art director at Queen, the direction they decided to go was each player represents their own franchise company type. So like one player is a fast food restaurant, but another player is like an oil change place, right? Another one's a cafe. That doesn't make any sense. We're all fast food restaurants, okay? One of us is McDonald's, one of us is Burger King, one of us is Wendy's, etc. That makes a lot more sense. So it's just weird thing about the art, but just mentally you can just tell yourself that. In fact, that's what I do for Medieval Merchant, is I just say, we're building franchises in these cities. Our Medieval Merchant is building, burger joints all throughout Middle Europe. The game is from 2 to 5 players. I don't recommend playing it with 2 or 3. The board shrinks. I believe in Medieval Merchant, I never played it with 2, but the board does shrink for 2 players, for example. I don't think it's for 3. In this one, the board does shrink for 2 and 3 players. I played it once 3 player, and the way the connections were like cut off in order to like accommodate these regions being missing just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't recommend it for 3 players, but 4 or 5 is great. There was probably, some people would consider it a flaw in Medieval Merchant, not so much me, it's just a different style, that there wasn't endgame scoring. I'm going to combine endgame scoring with catch-up mechanism. To me, they're basically the same thing. As long as you can obfuscate some scoring, then even if somebody has a big lead during the game, you don't feel like, oh, it's a waste of time to finish this game. That guy won, just to stop. No, because there's more scoring coming and maybe you can catch up. And Medieval Merchant didn't really have that, but franchise does. So what they have now is all these different regions. In Medieval Merchant, you just scored for presence in regions. So there's several different regions. And by the end of the game, every region you're in is a bonus 2 points. It's a very small bonus. And this one it's more of a rollout over the course of the game. So each region has its own scoring. Player with the most franchises in that region, second most, and then anybody who has at least 1 in the region will score the tertiary scoring. Those points vary wildly. Like sometimes you're getting 4 points just for presence. Usually it's 1, but some of the regions are like a huge amount. Sometimes the difference between first and second is huge, and sometimes it's just 1 point. And so you have to, it's all open information, so you can see, but you have to kind of study the board and see which regions are important to get presence in, or if you're competing with somebody, how important it is for first versus second. Scoring can be triggered, and they get bonus points if they are the ones who trigger the scoring, which is all the cities and all the towns are occupied. Then the region scores. And the player who triggers it will get a bonus. But that bonus goes up and down over the course of the game. Quite strange. I'm not super convinced. Like, if it was Tower of Babel scoring, that would be something, right? Low, a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. Really high now, nothing. Or low again, super low again, right? Drops off a cliff, the scoring. And the last regions don't score in franchise, but they don't progressively get bigger and bigger. I thought that could be interesting, but instead it kind of goes up and down. Strange decision to me, but I'm not a designer. One interesting / weird thing, let's say you're the one who scores the points for the city. All the franchises, the branches that are on that city, get placed and left in the region for region scoring, but the player who scored the city removes everything but one. I guess the intent is just trying to create some extra incentive to be second. Because normally in a city, whoever is first gets all the points, whoever second gets nothing, right? So the region scoring, I think, is an attempt to try to say, like, okay, your houses, your branches there are not wasted. You can compete for region scoring. I just find the region scoring to be a little bit unsatisfying. One, because the region score is just a huge amount. It's really important to look at first versus second versus, presence and the point differential, because that's massive in this game. The thing that I find most unsatisfying about the region scoring, though, is the tiebreaker. The first player to score a city in a region gets to put their branch, move one of their branches, next to the region scoring marker. In case there's a tie later on, they're going to break the tie. But let's say they're not involved in the tie. Let's say 2 other players are tied. How is the tie broken? Clockwise from that player. That's really unconvincing. I'm not convinced about that at all. So one player is scoring for the city, and they're going to be the tiebreaker. But because of turn order, that gives another player an advantage over me. I don't like it. And there's another change that franchise makes, which I understand why they did it. I get it. I think it's probably better for most people, or at least more intuitive. But to me, it really affects one of, to me, the bigger decisions in the game. In Medieval Merchant, you decide how much income you get. You do your expansion, like you build in a new branch or whatever, and you need to pay the connection cost, and you would have had to have had that income the previous turn, because you're getting income at the end of your turn, not at the beginning. But when it comes time to get income near the end of your turn, you're deciding how much to get. So for every city you have presence in, I mentioned this in the talking about Medieval Merchant, you have to decide. To me, that's a huge part of the game. It's very important. Do I want to compete in this city, or do I want to get the income? If they're not getting much income in that city, the decision is easy. But if I'm getting a lot of income, that decision becomes a lot harder. Because I'm sure they found it unintuitive, so basically they reversed it. So first of all, you get income at the start of your turn, and then for each city, you decide. But it's not get income or expand your presence for free. It's do nothing or expand your presence for $1. I know it feels kind of equivalent whether you're choosing get income or expand for free versus get income anyway and then do nothing or expand for money. But the cost is the same in franchise for every city. In Medieval Merchant, it was a big decision. If there's it's a high point value, high cost city, high income, but also high value for income, but high value for points, you're in that city with someone else. Do you compete for the points, or do you sit on it to try to get income? If the income amount is small, then it's basically the same decision. But when for those big cities where the income is potentially large, it's a huge decision. And that decision is kind of gone from franchise. Because by flattening the building cost to expand your presence in a city to be the same in every city, it's not equivalent to Medieval Merchant. And it feels like it takes away one of the big important decisions that I enjoy in Medieval Merchant. On the plus side, it speeds the game up, and the game is more intuitive this way. It's easier for people to learn. It's natural on your start of your turn, get income, then decide what to do with it, right? As opposed to planning and deciding what to do with what you already have, and then making a decision on how much money to get for the next turn. In practice, it's very minor, but I feel it. I feel that difference. It's a disappointment to me that the big, most important decision in Medieval Merchant has been softened, has been flattened in Franchise. There's another difference that I want to talk about because I think it's interesting. There are bonus tokens, I call them doublers, in both games that allow you to expand into 2 new locations on your turn instead of just 1, or expand your presence in a city by 2 instead of by 1, or get extra income. In Medieval Merchant, you have 2 of those tokens. If you don't use them by the end, tough nuts. So you want to use them, but you only have 2. When do you use them? You reach a point where you're competing with in something that's very important. You have to decide, is this one of the times that I use one of my only 2 doublers? Because I only got 2. I want to use them, but is now the time? If I use up my doublers too early, then other players will be able, who still have their doublers, can compete with me more fully in cities, right? Because they can double their presence in a city and I can't double back to get the lead again. What I think is interesting is that in Franchise, same concept. If you don't use them by the end of the game, you score 4 points. So actually 4 points is a lot. I think on paper, that looks better. That sounds better, right? That adds another decision. Some, I think, game designers would say, as well as lots of hobbyists. They'd be like, oh, okay, I think that's interesting. Do I want to use this doubler now because it's important? Or do I want the 4 points at the end of the game? I don't think it's better or worse. I think the difference is interesting. It's the difference in how you approach it, how you look at those tokens. Do you look at those tokens as a resource or just sort of an opportunistic thing? Because now when I use the token, I'm basically paying 4 points to use it. But I can also just ignore them. I don't have to use them at all. So again, that almost feels like that decision gets flattened a little bit, right? This is where, pointsality stuff, that's the direction that goes in, right? Because it's like whatever I do, I'm going to get a benefit. If I do nothing, I'm going to score 4 points for this token. If I use this token, I'm going to get a benefit. And is that benefit worth more than 4 points, right? Maybe that person's leading and I don't want them to score the points. So that's still an important decision. But whatever decision you make, it's going to benefit you. Of course, you can use a doubler in the wrong place. You can still play badly, but it softens the decision because it's like, is it important now to use this? Well, if I don't, I'll get 4 points. So either way. And 4 points is not tiny. 4 points is a lot. But in Medieval Merchant, you don't get any points if you save your doublers until the end of the game. They're just thrown away. So you want to use them. You have to use them. If you don't, you're leaving money on the table, so to speak. You're leaving points on the table. Surely 2 points in the game, you could have used those and gotten some points out of it. And the decision is when to use them. You know you have to use them, but when to use them. I don't think they're equivalent. To me, they have very different feelings. These changes make it feel to me, and I haven't super closely analyzed this, but it feels to me like Medieval Merchant is the more strategic game. Franchise is a bit more casual, a bit easier to get into, which is not a bad thing. I want to be clear. Franchise is pretty easy to teach. It is much more intuitive than Medieval Merchant. It's certainly prettier than Medieval Merchant by a few million degrees. As is often the case with remakes, though, I always find myself wanting something in between. I appreciate that the sums are smaller. There's less change to be made. I love the art. The board is bright and colorful and inviting, and they did a nice thing where the different sizes of cities, they're different size tokens. The 7s and 8s are all the same size. The 4s, 5s, and 6s are all the same size. The 2 and 3s are all the same size. So it's another way to vary up the game is just put the cities in different locations. Just put a token of the right size in a city, and it could be a 7 or an 8, or here it could be a 2 or a 3. And just that little bit of variability is enough. There's lots of great things that I like about this, but in terms of gameplay, in terms of the decision making, I still prefer Medieval Merchant. So I wish, the perfect version for me would be something in between. And I'm in favor of the simplified routes. There's only like 5 different values that the routes can be. I like the art direction and the variability that comes from those city tokens. It's a little bit different than the variability that comes out from putting, like that city in Medieval Merchant is always going to be a 6. You just don't know when the 6 is going to open up. But I don't like the region scoring. I don't like the flattening of that, to me, that best, most interesting decision. To me, like what Medieval Merchant, what I like about that experience was the planning one turn ahead, right? Trying to make sure you have the enough income to do what you want to do on your next turn, and then each turn having to, prioritize each city. What do I want to do? And these are decisions, like I said, that are flattened in franchise. Really, like the only things that I find annoying about Medieval Merchant are the beige board, which I'm fine with, but is hard to get people excited about, and just the annoyance of making so much change. And those 2 things were fixed in franchise or improved upon in franchise, but the designer also made a bunch more changes. And except for a little bit in terms of the setup variability, to me personally, while I still like franchise, those changes to me are for the worse. Wouldn't necessarily be for you. It's a little bit hard to justify telling people, like, go out and get Medieval Merchant. Skip this, go find a used copy of Medieval Merchant somewhere. I'm not going to tell you that. If I never played Medieval Merchant, I'd probably have a better opinion of this game. I just think it's really interesting how, that so many attempts to modernize games tend to take away. They absolutely almost all attempts at modernizing games make the games more attractive to look at. And maybe they improve some things that were very clearly, obviously annoyances of the old. But so often, they also try to tweak what made the game special in the first place. And in my experience, often for the worse. Not always. Something like a Zoo Vadis is an amazing remake. I thought the old game was great too, but the new game elevates it even further. I find that most remakes of those old classic German games, they lose something in the restoration. I'm probably sound quite negative on franchise. I apologize. I actually really like franchise. It's interesting to play Medieval Merchant first, look and see what changes they made, and go, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And then I play it and go, okay, I do know how I feel about that. Not great. But if you don't need to play 6 players, I wouldn't necessarily bother to try to seek out Medieval Merchant, a used copy of Medieval Merchant. Making changes annoying, the beige board, unless you and your family and friends love beige. Again, it's going to be a hard sell, right? But right now I'm leaning towards keeping Medieval Merchant. A, because it plays 6, and B, I do like those harder decisions. It has sharper edges, which I appreciate. Thanks for watching. Older games like Medieval Merchant and franchise. See, here's the thing, right? I would normally say they don't stop being good because newer games come out, and it doesn't. Franchise didn't stop being good, but yeah, older games are where it's at. Take care.